Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome you to today's meeting of the Planning Applications Committee. If we move straight on to the agenda, well, just before I do that, can I first of all, as well as welcoming the public, a big warm welcome to Melissa. Melissa is one of our newly appointed planning officers, so enjoy. You've chosen a fairly large agenda today to what we normally have. Okay, so item number 1 is the evacuation procedure. We're not expecting any alarms to go off, so if they do, we'll treat them for real. If we can evacuate the building via, obviously there's only one door here, along the corridor, down the steps and meet across the road by the Yorkshire Bank. Please don't use the lift, and if anybody needs any help to get out, give us a shout. We'll make sure that assistance is given. It's also an appropriate time to remind people to turn your phones off or put them onto silent, and also just to remind people that, as in pretty much all of our meetings, are being filmed and they're put out on YouTube within the next day or so, round about that period of time. Item number 2 is to receive apologies.
Apologies from Councillor Jane Sargent, Councillor Gwyn Pomfret and Councillor John Glass.
Okay. Thank you. Item number 3 is to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of August. You happy that I sign those?
Maybe.
Item number 4 is to receive declarations of disclosable pecuniary and other interest in accordance with the Members' Code of Conduct if they're not already printed on the agenda. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I know it's already printed, but having had specific legal advice from Mr Richardson, I should draw the committee's attention to application number 2, which is the Attleborough site. And as a director of NABCEL, there has been a officer decision to have a purchase option on that site, which would then be leased over to NABCEL if planning consent is granted. As a director of NABCEL, I've been advised to highlight that specifically to the committee. But I still have a dispensation to speak and vote. I've just had that advice.
Okay, thank you. Kind of sport one of my questions when we get to it. Right, okay, thank you. Any others? No? Item number 5 are declarations of contact. Councillor Wilson.
Me again, Chair. Both the objectors to the Hill Farm Golf Drive application have been in contact with me. As per usual, I have given no indications how I intend to speak or vote at the committee.
Okay, thank you. And that takes us on to item number 6, which is applications for planning permission where the public have indicated a desire to speak. If I just run through that process for you, what will happen is the planning officer will present the report. Following on from that, I will take the speakers as listed. I don't think there's any extras that I'm aware of. Under the Constitution, you're allowed 3 minutes to speak. Once that 3 minutes is up, I will stop you. That's so that I'm fair to everybody. Following on from that, planning officer might want members may ask you any points of clarification. There can only be points of clarification arising from what you've said during those 3 minutes. And then if the officer needs to add anything at that point, they will do. And then once something's moved and seconded, we'll debate the matter and hopefully reach a decision. We normally do reach a decision, but on occasions they may be deferred for site visits or for further information, things like that. Okay? Right, our first item then is Hill Farm Golf Drive, Nuneaton.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for a change of use of some existing agricultural store buildings to a B1 business use. The site is part of the Hill Farm, and the existing agricultural buildings are currently used to store farm produce. The site is within the West Midlands Greenbelt and is accessed off a small track off Golf Drive, Nuneaton. The key issues to consider in the determination of this planning application are the impact on the Greenbelt, the impact on residential amenity, the impact on highway safety, and the impact on a listed building. As mentioned, the site is within the Greenbelt. This designation is the strictest of the land designations within the borough, and national guidance and local policy both state that inappropriate development that would harm the Greenbelt should be refused except in very special circumstances. The National Planning Policy Framework also has a section in paragraph 146 which states that certain forms of the development in the Greenbelt are not inappropriate as long as they preserve the openness of the Greenbelt. In this case, the buildings are already on site, so it is considered that there would be only a limited visual impact and no significant impact on openness. Overall, officers consider that the development would represent a positive reuse of existing buildings with only limited impact on the Greenbelt. With respect to residential amenity, the proposed new use will be 380 metres from the nearest residential property on St Andrews Drive and Golf Drive. After consultation with the Council's environmental health team, no objections were raised. The use class proposed is for a B1 use, which would allow an office use, research and development, or any light industry which does not cause detriment to residential amenity. Officers consider, therefore, that there will be no significant impact on the residential amenity of surrounding occupiers. In regard to highway safety, both Warwickshire County Council Highways Authority and the Warwickshire County Council Rights of Way team were consulted on this application and raised no objection. In the case of the Highways Authority, this was on the condition that a lay-by is created on the access road to allow for passing and that a warning sign is erected. Hill Farmhouse itself is a Grade 2 listed building, and as such, regard must be had to the proposal's impact on the listed building. It is considered that since the change of use will not result in structural changes, and a condition will not allow outside storage, that the character and setting of the listed building will not be significantly affected. In conclusion, therefore, the proposal is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions laid out on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr Gilby, I'm happy if you want to speak from where you are,
Okay,
or you can come forward if you want to.
No, if I hear people will hear
Yeah.
rather than hear from the back of my head, if that's all right.
Okay, wherever people feel most comfortable. I meant to say it and I forgot.
Oh, no worries, thank you. Okay. I don't know how familiar you are with the site setting, but it is adjacent to the Grade 2 listed building, as stated in your comments there. Access is by a single track, which actually goes across what in the borough plan is known as HSG 9, on which there are plans to build something like 600 houses. The single track is also a designated footpath with no passing places as said. Well used by walkers, dog walkers, cyclists, children, etc. On that particular piece of track, if you're familiar with it, you'll know that on one side, if you want to get away from a vehicle, there's a fence. The other side is the farm field, which is about 2 feet below the surface of the road. So either way, it's not easy for pedestrians to get out of the way. The track then joins Golf Drive in the little cul-de-sac at the end, at the junction with Shakespeare and Golf. Shakespeare and Golf is the right of way. The little cul-de-sac is an offshoot of that junction, very narrow, often parked cars, and is the access for 102 and 104 Golf Drive. Golf Drive is actually quite narrow. It's a bus route, and 2 buses can only pass with extreme difficulty. There's the exit to the golf club, very heavy traffic, and some of them come out of there a little bit quick. And at the top there's the access to the shop, which is also for the trucks. And beyond that you've got the double midi island, which in the borough plan is listed as a hotspot, and in the main modifications the inspector has put it as a point to look at. Any vehicles going up to the double mini, which is a problem now to get out. There are weight limits towards Bramcote or Gypsy Lane, traffic calm to Bolkington Lane, so the main traffic route is likely to be back into town, which I don't think is a good move. In this document, the TRIX data says there will be less than 800 traffic movements a year by this business. 800 traffic movements a year is less than 3 per day. So it's not much of a business if it's only attracting 3 vehicles, so I suspect the figures here are somewhat suspect. There must be more than 3 vehicles a day to make the business viable. The use is undefined. It could be light industry, which could give noise, and we understand it's possible for a B1 to gradually morph into a B8 or other uses. I would think that the committee need to look at a number of things. The setting, most importantly the danger to the people on the footpath, and I don't think an HGV passing place is of any use. It's also interesting, it says in this document it's Leicestershire County Council that agreed the passing place, so I find it a bit odd. The roads, the traffic and the use, they're the things I would go for mainly. But the footpath and the danger there is the big one, and the amount of traffic. 3 vehicles, I mean 3 vehicles a day, it must be more than that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Are there any points of clarification? No? Okay, thank you. Mrs Smith?
I have a disabled little boy who has a tube in his tummy and is fed by a tube. He has had cellulitis twice this year just by children putting their fingers on it, which could have turned into sepsis. His life cannot be saved if it's turned into sepsis. All this pollution in the area is going to affect him. I'm not going to be able to let him out in the garden to play in the paddling pool. If anything gets near that tube area, I bought the tube here today for people to look at. It could put his life seriously at risk. And you know, if you're going to have 7.5 tonnes up and down there, you know, it's going to kick an awful lot of, you know, whatever you want to call it, into the pollution. I can't take the risk. He's 5 years old. He has many health conditions. And if anything goes to that tube area and it turns into sepsis, it cannot be saved for the simple reason they cannot remove a limb or an arm. Is because the tube is internal, it will just pass away. And that's my concern deeply for this little boy. You know, it's to me, I don't know what to say anymore. I mean, you know, forgive me if I'm being a bit slow or I'm a bit confused or whatever. But, you know, I can't, you know, put this at his life at risk with all this pollution. I moved to that area because it was a green belt area, everything was fine, and I can't, if anything like that happens, what am I supposed to do with a 5-year-old little boy? I can't even let him out in the garden to play.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Are there any points of clarification? No? Anything to come back on? Okay, which takes us to the committee part of it then, to enable debate to take place. Can I move the recommendation, which is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions printed? Is that seconded?
Second.
Any member? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Before I go into my comments, I just want to ask a couple of questions of the officers, if I may.
Yeah.
You mentioned a lay-by in your opening statement. Could you specify where the lay-by will be?
If you look on the agenda, it is a small hatched area shown on the plan. So page 21 has a small hatched area on the plan. That's where Warwickshire County Council highways were content with it to be.
Okay. And the traffic modelling that you mentioned, about all the vehicular movements, has that been factored in with the proposed traffic from site HSG9 within the borough plan?
I think it's just for this use, that TRIX data would be just for this use. That's what the applicant put in for this proposal, and that's what highways have assessed. Whether or not highways assess it alongside additional data, I'm not sure. But the TRIX data to support this application would solely be for this application.
Thank you, Chair. In that case, I have grave concerns about this application because we are told that now the borough plan is with the inspector. It has some weight within planning. I accept it's limited, but if we are considering applications which are directly within the scope and ambit of the identified housing sites, then the applications, in my view, should be factoring in the proposed vehicular movements from those sites which are identified within the borough plan. Now, HSG9 is for a site of at least now 621 dwellings. Adding on to the vehicular movements from this, there may be only 800. I share Mr Gilby's scepticism, because if you're going to operate a business, one would presume you would want more than 3 vehicular movements a day, whether that's the average or whether they're going to discount holiday periods, etc. But you've got a vehicle going out, coming in, going out again. Where's it going to come in, or vice versa? Now, we don't know what the traffic mitigations are going to be yet for HSG9. That was requested by the inspector. County Highways has already expressed a concern about accessing the site, which will be using this particular route to get into the housing site with the double islands. Will this new hatched site, where the lay-by is, has that been factored into HSG9? Because there is also the route in there. That is the main route. How are you going to also get all the transport and traffic into, the construction traffic into HSG9 with this new proposed use of the land? I have grave concerns. It may be that officer's recommendation is still approval, but I think to do a thorough job, we need to have that traffic data fed in from HSG9, because that will have grave impacts. I would actually move that we defer the application pending confirmation that the proposed HSG9 sites, vehicular movements, whatever the modelling is called, has been taken into account. If it has not been done, then that needs to be done before this committee assesses the application. If not, then I would ask the committee to withdraw the permitted development rights as a very bare minimum of this application, so it cannot go to B8. And I've spoken to Catherine Morton about this, that you can remove the permitted development rights from B1 to B8. I know it's more usual to be done in housing, but as a bare minimum that should be removed, because if you're going to have a distribution centre there as a potential with B8, then that throws everything completely out of kilter. But I think my first concern would be the deferment for more information about the vehicular movements of HSG9 and how that factors in, because without it I don't think we're considering this application properly, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smith.
Totally agree with Councillor Wilson on everything he said. I'd like to second his motion. Before I speak, I notice in the schedule of conditions there's no number 1. We start at number 2. Is that because it's missing or just a mislabelling?
That's standard.
Oh, is that right? Okay. I thought I found something then, but I hadn't. I agree. There's so much unknown about this site. We don't know what industrial use there is going to be. We don't know what transport movements there are. I agree totally with the speakers about the transport movements. 3 a day seems ridiculous. So I can't support it in its current form. And I think the idea to come back and have that traffic modelling done properly is well worthwhile.
Thank you. Councillor Graham.
I was just going to see what Councillor Smith has done and second Councillor Wilson's proposal So what I've said has already been said.
Thank you. Councillor Townley?
Thank you, Chair. I have some concerns about this on the basis of I don't feel as though there is sufficient information, because, you know, reading through it, it says at 1 and the final paragraph, at present the applicant has no end user, therefore the level of employment that the site could provide is unknown. So thereby it could be 10 people or it could be 100 people. We don't know what the employment is going to be or how much employment effectively it will generate for the local area. We all want employment, but I would want some more information. And again, on 2, the end user is unknown. There are no hours of operation submitted. I accept the environmental health team have said it's acceptable, but I still don't think there is enough information in this to give us and the one word that I didn't like in this whole thing was the word track. The track leading to the farm. We're not even talking about a road. We're talking about a track. And if whether there's 800 or 1800 vehicles going to go in and out there a day, I would have thought that there should have been a proper road there for those vehicles to use. And I'm very unhappy about there being no passing places other than that one tiny little lay-by that's on the map. I'm edging on the point that Councillor Wilson has made, that we need more information on this application, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I did put myself down to speak, and I've got to say I absolutely support what's been moved and seconded. And before I came today, and I'm always careful about predetermination, but for me, there just wasn't enough information about most of the application, not just the tricks data. And so Councillor Wilson was happy with it. I think any other information that we can gather before it comes back to us is really important. And some of the things that I'd already written down, I wasn't absolutely sure about this 800 HGV movements. I got it down as a week. I thought that can't be right, but even a year, so that it takes it to the other extreme. Yeah. So I think we need.
I'm happy to incorporate that.
I was a little bit confused as well when Mr. Gilby mentioned about some of the data in the tricks report come from Leicestershire. I don't.
Yeah, in the.
I wish I could bring you in, but I can't.
Oh.
But if we can check that out, it might. It's holding it up, so there must be something in there. But normally it would come through Warwickshire County Council, although the boundaries are a bit tight up there, I guess. I don't know whether that might be it.
Might be the next thing.
The other thing, as Councillor Tandy has just said, is the lack of. I can't quite believe that there's not even an indication of what the end user might be. Surely when you're putting forward something and getting plans together, you've got some idea of what it might be. And I don't want to go down the conspiracy theory route if they know and they don't want us to know, but I'd like us to be asking that question more about what it's likely to be, because I don't see how you can do that calculation and assessment without knowing what that end use is going to be. So again, with that no known use, but yet the county, they speak about no articulation. I don't think they mean that in a language point of view. I think they mean it in vehicles, so there'll be no articulated vehicles, but a lot of HGVs are articulated, so it kind of doesn't quite fit again, and it's again about the assessment. I'm also interested in obviously it's a change of use to B1, and under B1 and 2, where was I? 2, 3. So page 18 towards the top. or any industrial processes which can be carried out in any residential area without causing detriment to the amenities area. First of all, we don't know what, if any, the on-site industrial use might be, but secondly, we don't know about getting to and from that, because in my mind, the use of the site could possibly have a detrimental impact on the you know, the route in and out. And we've heard, you know, what's been said earlier. Could you give me, I mean, these all, if we defer it, I'll probably ask all these again anyway, but just in case I lose my paperwork before it comes back, if it's deferred, could you give me some indication, because we, I think it says it's, what is it, 1,000 square metres of site? It kind of doesn't mean a lot to me, or I guess a lot of lay people. That could you give us some comparison? Is it the size of a Audi or a Lidl or something like that? I mean, I understand it'd be 100 by 100 if it was square,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, so it's almost 2 football pitches, that kind of size.
so it's big, yeah, it's big.
fairly big.
Yeah. So it's
Roughly.
yeah.
Just
Okay.
to
Yeah.
mention a point that Councillor Wilson made about permitted development and change into a B8 use. Because of the size of the unit anyway, they wouldn't have PD rights to go from B1 to B8, so they would have to apply for planning permission.
Okay. Right. So and it's interesting. Am I assuming that this actual building that we're talking about is the same one that was given permission in 2002 for grain and potatoes? Is that the?
Just so I understand it, yes, that's correct, it's the same one.
So I'm sorry if I've gone through that. They're just sort of other things that I'd sort of got myself prepared to ask anyway, but they might be useful for you checking out, trying to get the extra information. Apologies for going on about that. Any other member? No? Okay. In that case, I'm just going to move to the amendment as such. So it's been moved and seconded that we defer the application specifically to look into the TRIX data and the implications of the local plan, because of its at that stage in HSG 9 was there?
Yes, Chair.
And but also, if the movement seconds happy, that we ask for as much extra information as we can get, particularly about the end user and how we get those calculations. People happy with that? All those in favour of that? Okay, that's unanimous, so I guess I've got to do a copy of the amendment. Okay, so that becomes a substantive motion. All those in favour of that? That's unanimous, thank you. Okay, so you'll have heard that, but basically the item's deferred now until we get that extra information for the committee to be able to make a more informed decision.
That's lovely.
It will come back to us whenever our next meeting is. I guess because they've spoken, they will be informed of that, won't they? Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Could I make one very silly point?
On
A
your way.
simple point might be useful. I went on the website yesterday against the planning application number to see if there's any more information that we could glean. Nothing. Tonight I was given the agenda for tonight's meeting, which has got all the information about the recommendation. There's nothing to, and apparently that's in another part of the council's website about meetings.
Yeah, the
There's nothing to link the two, so I didn't know about this until literally I was walking in the room.
The agendas go out on the website at the same time as they're sent out on
Yes.
a paper copy as
But there's
well.
nothing to link the two. So I went on and looked at the planning application number,
Okay, if you want to email me with that, I'll make sure that's put through to,
something to link.
To those people.
Certainly can, so
Yeah.
very kindly, thank you.
but if you'd like to email me or directly to the council officer, but if you email me, I'll pass it on. But If you don't, I'll forget.
It'll help people in the future, perhaps, yes. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we can move on to item number 2 then, the former Attleborough Snooker Club side.
Chair. This application is to consider amending the legal agreement signed under a previous approval, reference 034184. The legal agreement was for the provision of 5 affordable one-bedroom flats, and the applicant now seeks to amend this to a commuted sum for off-site provision. The previous approval was for the erection of 14 apartments and 4 houses at 57 Highfield Road, approved in 2017. The application is before you because the new proposal would not be in accordance with the standard tariff for affordable housing. A previous application to vary the legal agreement was made, but this was refused by the Planning Committee back in February this year. And when the applicant attempted to appeal this refusal to the Planning Inspectorate, they were informed that appeal could not be lodged within 5 years of the approval of the original agreement. The development has now been constructed, but the developer has found that the scheme would not be financially viable if the 5 dwellings had to be affordable. In this situation, a viability assessment has been requested and received and now scrutinised by the Council's Principal Land and Property Officer. They have carried out a review and analysis of the financial appraisal and also ran their own appraisal and residual valuation check. Land and Property's response to the planning team was that the scheme would be unviable even if a registered social landlord could be found for the 5 dwellings, which I understand it's not been able to this date. In conclusion, our assessor established that the original scheme with the affordable housing element could not viably provide the level of affordable housing given the sales values, development costs and level of return required. A scheme without any affordable housing struggles to deliver even a scheme without any affordable housing struggles to deliver a return close to that which a developer would need to achieve to make the scheme viable. Notwithstanding this, excuse me, the developer has actually offered to pay an off-site contribution of £20,000. Discussions have been carried out with the MBBC housing team, who are disappointed not to receive the affordable units on site, but have agreed that they could use the £20,000 towards the acquisition of a dwelling nearby in the wards of Attleborough, Abbey or Wembley. The developer has agreed that the payment could be considered within these wards. Therefore, as it is evidence that the site is not commercially viable, it will be difficult to refuse on this basis. Whilst the viability assessment concludes that we should not be asking for any contributions, the developer has still offered this commuted sum of £20,000, which in the circumstances is considered acceptable. The recommendation is therefore one of approval to amend the legal agreement to a commuted sum of £20,000 in lieu of on-site provision. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Zola. Mr. David Smith.
Good evening. I'm David Smith from JBC Properties. The basic development history is that we originally signed the 106 agreement on the understanding that we could sell the 5 one-bedroom apartments, which are the subject of the 106, at a discounted rate to housing associations or a housing association. When we neared completion of the construction of the flats, we instructed independent agents to contact all of the housing associations on Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council list. All of those contacted, including Orbit, who we personally visited, stated that they had no interest in purchasing new build apartments on such a small scale. That left us in the position of having 5 apartments subject to a 106 agreement, which had no market value whatsoever. And without a sale, even at a discounted rate, it left us financially in a very precarious position. We then approached the council to inform them of the position and had a meeting with Jane Grant of the Housing Department, who said that her department would contact all the housing associations personally. However, they received the same response we had encountered, i.e. no interest whatsoever. Subsequently, we entered into a contract with Nuneaton Council to purchase all of the flats at a discounted rate, but subject from Nuneaton Council to the 106 obligation being removed, and then the council will then rent properties out. We have made an offer of £20,000 to the council as an off-site contribution in lieu of the 106 and hope and trust that this is acceptable to all parties. I thank you for your time in listening to me.
Okay, thank you. Any points of clarification? Yeah, I've got a couple, because it's easily done, but I'm a bit confused. I mean, it shouldn't have any direct impact on how we arrive at a decision. But you mentioned about the council and NABSO. Is that something that's still on the table then, regardless of this possible commuted sum?
It's a contract subject to the planning committee sorting the 106.
Right, so yeah.
It's not a done deal.
No, okay, I mean that's right. I think you've already answered this of sorts, but why didn't you talk to social providers before you actually started to build out?
We didn't. Building under a 106 agreement is all I've never done it before in my life. I just presumed, wrongly as it turns out, Mr. Chair, that we wouldn't have a problem in selling them. I never dreamt we'd be in this position. I thought there'd be probably half a dozen housing associations interested in taking them, but it turns out there wasn't one.
Right. I mean, my experience says that normally people talk to the other people before they commit themselves to that. Okay. Any other points of clarification? No? In that case, to enable debate to take place, can I move the recommendation, which is to vary the legal agreement to a commuted sum for off-site affordable housing provision? That's seconded?
Seconded.
Any member? Councillor
Yes,
Smith? Oh, sorry, Councillor Smith.
Yes, I remember this in February, and I remember at the time, although I think we all mourn the loss of affordable housing, which we desperately need. I think it made sense at the time, and I was actually for it in February, and I'm still for it. And with the addition of the NABSO negotiation, I think that makes it an even stronger case. So I'm definitely for this one.
Councillor Tandy?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm not sure that we're left with very much choice about whether or not we can agree this application, bearing in mind what has been said, plus of course the offer of the funding that has been offered to help out with affordable areas in other areas, in the areas where that absolutely need it. So I would support this, but I'm going to have a bit of licence here, Chair, seeing as how the applicant is here. The only complaint I've had from local residents in my patch about this building is, can you please paint it a different colour, because they know.
Well,
But I support the application.
we can't.
No, it was licensed,
It's
Chair.
what was in the eye of the beholder, I guess. But we can't make them do it, but they might listen to you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Like Councillor Smith, I remember this application coming back in February, and I was quite concerned that the committee refused it, because at one point we were in a position where theoretically we would be having to take and this was the advice at the time that I asked the legal officer, potentially going to court to try and get possession of the properties, which would have placed us in a very strange position. So even before the whole NABSL idea came forward, I was very much in favour of the application, because having some contribution to affordable housing is better than having nothing at all. Now, if the officers have gone through all the financial information and said he can't even really afford, basically on the viability assessment, to afford £20,000, but he's still willing to do it, I think having £20,000 is better than receiving nothing at all. The whole NABSL issue, I want to place on record, doesn't bear into my decision making, because I was for it before, and like Councillor Tandy, I hate the colour. And one of the first things I asked at NABCEL when it was even put on the table was, does that mean we can paint it a different colour? I haven't had an answer. I assure Councillor Tandy if I do, I will inform her if there is an answer. I don't think it will be the answer that both of us want though, unfortunately. But I think moving forward, Chair, on a serious note, we haven't got much of a choice really in the grand scheme of things, because either he goes bust trying to do it, we take him to court trying to do it, or we get a middle way solution which actually makes the benefit to the council and to the residents. So I'll support it, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other member? Councillor Shepherd?
Can I just ask about this request for the 106 obligations on the addendum? Is that a request?
So that's an additional request that's been received since preparing the agenda. However, it can't be met. The scheme isn't viable, so even any additional ones also couldn't be met.
I mean, I do have some concerns about losing the affordable element, and I wouldn't like this to set precedent for things moving forward, because I think the 25% affordable housing, in my mind, sometimes isn't enough, but I wouldn't like to think it's going to set a precedent moving forward. I think in this case, I don't think we've got much choice.
No, I don't think whatever decision the committee makes would set any precedent with it. And I mean, I do have some concerns over it, and that's why I asked one of the questions is, you know, my experience is anybody that's applying for planning permission, quite rightly, is that it's subject to getting the permission before they're doing something. So I can't quite understand why that engagement wasn't made with social landlords prior to that, and get, you know, it is normally before anything happens. And again, in regards to the viability, what was the original assessment? You know, did the build cost end up more than the estimated build cost? It doesn't mention that in the report. And in regards to the commuted sum, I think £20,000 is a very small amount really compared to what they're likely to be that's been sold privately. But I accept it's a difficult one to get our heads round. I think the sale price per unit would have been a lot more than well, the equivalent of £4,000 per unit for the council to use somewhere else. They're not going to be able to buy anything realistically with that. Nevertheless, I'm looking at purely on the planning grounds. Is there any other member? No? In that case, the recommendation is as printed to vary the legal agreement to community sum for off-site affordable housing provision. All those in favour of that? And against? I think that's it. Abstention, that's it. Okay, so that's approved. Okay, thank you very much. But I don't have any items of urgent business. Thank you very much for your attendance and declare the meeting closed. You come again, Melissa.
May I thank